Can you even imagine a war that lasts for nearly 800 years? I mean, think about that. A single, relentless conflict that doesn't just forge a nation, but redefines an entire continent. And, believe it or not, launches one of the world's very first global empires. Well, that's the incredible story of how Spain was born.
All right, so to really get our heads around this, we got to look at a timeline that stretches over 1,000 years. It all kicks off with the fall of Rome. Then you've got the Visigoths running the show for a while. But the main event, the thing that dominates everything, is this yearly 800-year period of Islamic rule and the Christian Reconquista, this epic struggle to reclaim the land. And it all leads up to one huge year, 1492, the birth of modern Spain. So our story, it doesn't begin with some grand, glorious battle. Nope. It all starts with the total collapse of one kingdom and the lightning-fast arrival of a new empire that was about to change Iberia forever. You see, by the early 8th century, the Visigothic kingdom, these guys had been in charge for centuries, right? They were basically their own worst enemy. They were just constantly fighting among themselves, these bitter civil wars over who gets to be king. And all that infighting left them fractured, weak, and just wide open to any threat from the outside. And boy, did that weakness prove fatal. Because when the Umayyad Caliphate crossed the strait from North Africa, they didn't find a strong, unified kingdom. They found total chaos. At the big battle, the Battle of Guadalete, King Roderick's army was just a mess, full of betrayal and disorganization, and they were up against a smaller but super disciplined and unified force of Arabs and Berbers who were absolutely hungry for conquest. And the result? It was just unbelievably fast. Get this, it took the Umayyad forces just 7 years to conquer almost the entire Iberian Peninsula. 7 years. Think about that. It's a stunning testament to how effective their military was and, just how completely the Visigothic power had collapsed. And just like that, poof, the Visigothic kingdom was gone. And in its place, a new Islamic state rose up, a state known as Al-Andalus. And this place, it would go on to shape the culture, the science, and the society of Iberia for the next 800 years. Okay, so you might be wondering, how did the new Muslim rulers manage a population that was still overwhelmingly Christian and Jewish, right? Well, the answer lies in this legal concept called the dhimmi. It basically created a really clear social hierarchy. So, in practice, what this meant was that Christians and Jews, they were tolerated. They could practice their own religions, but they were definitely second-class citizens. The big thing was they had to pay a special tax called the jizya. And you can imagine, over the centuries, that tax was a pretty powerful nudge for a lot of people to convert to Islam and get full status in society. But here's the thing. Not all of Iberia fell. Way up in the north, in these rugged, unforgiving mountains where conquerors have always had a hard time, a little pocket of resistance was born. This is where a Visigothic nobleman named Pelagius enters the picture. He just flat out refused to accept defeat. He rallied what was left of the Christian fighters and these fierce local mountain folks, and together they sparked the very first flame of what would become a nearly 800-year war of reclamation. And this single idea, this idea of reconquest, it would drive generations. See, it wasn't just a war for them. It was the Reconquista, a holy mission to restore Christian rule to lands they believed were theirs by right. I mean, that is a powerful, powerful concept, and it would literally forge the identity of these new Christian kingdoms. Now, their first real win came at the Battle of Covadonga. And look, it was probably more of a small skirmish than a massive battle, but its importance, it was monumental. Pelagius's guys ambushed a bigger Muslim army in this narrow mountain pass. It was this huge symbolic victory that not only established the independent kingdom of Asturias, but more importantly, it proved that resistance was actually possible.
All right, so for the next couple hundred years, things are kind of a slow grind. The small Christian kingdoms are mostly playing defense, slowly pushing their borders bit by bit. But then the whole power dynamic in Al-Andalus starts to shift, and I mean dramatically.
It all happens in the year 1031. The central authority, the glue that held Al-Andalus together for so long, it just collapsed. The whole thing was torn apart by infighting and competing ambitions, and the once mighty Caliphate of Córdoba completely shattered. So, what took its place?
something called the taifas, basically dozens of small, independent little kingdoms. And for the Christian kingdoms up north, this was a golden opportunity. They started to expand their territory, sure, but they also got really smart, playing the taifas off against each other. They even got strong enough to force these weakened Muslim kingdoms to pay them tribute.
But of course, all this Christian success didn't go unnoticed. It prompted this fierce response from North Africa. You had these stricter, more fundamentalist Berber dynasties, like the Almohads, who crossed into Iberia completely outraged by what they were seeing. They reunited Al-Andalus by force and launched this massive counterattack that stopped the Reconquista dead in its tracks. So now you've got this intense back-and-forth struggle, right? And it all comes to a head in one single pivotal year, 1212. At this point, the very fate of the entire peninsula is hanging in the balance. So in 1212, facing this massive Almohad threat, the Christian kingdoms did something they almost never did. They actually united. A combined army from Castile, Aragon, and Navarre absolutely crushed the Almohad forces in a battle so decisive it basically broke the back of Muslim military power in Iberia for good. Okay, so after that massive victory at Las Navas de Tolosa, the Reconquista just kicks into high gear. It accelerates like crazy. The question is no longer if the Christians are going to retake the peninsula. Now the question is, what's the final kingdom actually going to look like? You see, this final phase, it wasn't just about conquering more land. It was about uniting the conquerors themselves. First, you have the kingdoms of Castile and Leon merging together. And then comes the real game changer, the strategic marriage of Isabella of Castile and Ferdinand of Aragon. This brings the two most powerful Christian crowns together, creating a political entity that, hey, we can finally recognize as Spain. And by the middle of the 13th century, the result of all this unification and military momentum is crystal clear. Al-Andalus, which once controlled almost the entire peninsula, is now reduced to just the small emirate of Granada way down in the south. And really, it only survived by paying tribute to the super powerful kingdom of Castile. And then we come back to that famous year, 1492. The very same year Columbus set sail, by the way. The Catholic monarchs, Isabella and Ferdinand, they conquer that last stronghold, the fall of Granada. It marks the end of a nearly 800-year chapter of history, and the final birth of a new, unified, and powerfully Christian kingdom.
But here's the real takeaway. This centuries-long struggle didn't just create a country. It created a very specific kind of country. It forged a unified, battle-hardened, and intensely religious kingdom. And that kingdom was perfectly poised to take all the immense energy and ambition built up over 800 years of war and turn it outward, right at the exact moment that new worlds were waiting to be discovered.